And we welcome you back to Newsmax Prime with this reminder that once again you can become part of our conversation at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. And as you and I both know, Newt Gingrich is one of the finalists to become Donald Trump's running mate. Newt and I spoke Saturday while he was in Paris for the Free Iran Conference. Now, some of the subsequent internet reports did not completely quote what Newt had to say. So listen to the speaker in his own words and in their entirety. I began by asking him about the current divide between the public and the police.
Let's draw the two because they're parallel but different. Now, I don't want to talk about both innocent people who get hurt and about the police. The police are exactly like the military. They are the thin line between us and barbarism, between us and anarchy and riots, between us and rule of the toughest and meanest. So the police are really, really central to what we call civilization. And that means that any act of violence against the police has to be dealt with very harshly. And frankly, I think anybody who advocates violence against the police should be dealt with very harshly. I think we have to modify what you're allowed to say and say, look, you advocate attacking the people who are protecting society. We're going to put you in jail. We're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior.
Should the Black Lives Matter group be designated as a domestic terror organization?
I don't know enough to say that. I think clearly a lot of the people who are involved in Black Lives Matter are just citizens who are trying to say to the country how worried they are, because that's the other story. I mean, just before the shootings in Dallas of policemen, you had two examples where apparently, at least from what we currently know, innocent people ended up being killed by the police. And so I think both problems have to be addressed. It's not one or the other. We want to find ways to have better training and better approaches for the police to not have the kind of incidents we had in Baton Rouge and Minneapolis. We want to absolutely stamp out anybody who would be engaged in violence against the police, because that blue line is the margin of civilization.
You mentioned the blue line, but you also mentioned in social media the dynamics of white and black, not a separate America, but I want to make sure I had this right. Words to the effect that white Americans really don't have a concept of what black Americans face.
Well, very simple test. I know Harvard, Yale, Princeton graduates making $400,000 or $500,000 a year who are black, who tell their children, if you get involved in any kind of situation involving the police, be very careful. Do not in any way stand up to them. Do not in any way antagonize them, because you are at risk. I don't know of any white parent that says that, because it wouldn't even occur to us that it's a threat. And I talk to people like J.C. Watts, who can tell you a story about driving a brand new car through his congressional district when he was in Congress, being pulled over by the local deputy sheriff because he didn't understand why some black guy had this nice car, getting out and saying, you know, not only am I your congressman, I was also an All-American quarterback at Oklahoma, and you're just stupid. You know, you had to be J.C. Watts to do that. But his point was, there is a clear difference still in America at a psychological, cultural level between being black and being white or Asian or Latino. And I think if we're going to solve the problem, you know, all of us conservatives who say, if you're going to take on terrorism, you got to be willing to talk about radical Islam. Well, if you're really going to solve the problem of racism in America, you have to have the guts to talk about the racism in America.
You've also publicly talked about the Republican ticket going into the south side of Chicago, going into the inner city. I'd imagine that'd be a prescription whether or not you are personally on that ticket. But if you are named to that ticket, how much of a priority would you make that during the campaign?
Well, look, I think it's a moral imperative that the Republican Party step up to the plate. We've not had a Republican city councilman in Baltimore since 1942. The city is a disaster. The police are leaving. They can't recruit new police because they have a prosecutor who's so anti-police. There are neighborhoods in Baltimore that are terrible tragedy at a human level. Southside Chicago last weekend had 2 shootings an hour for 15 hours. No, they can't. We can't tolerate that in America. The Democrats can't solve it. Their institutions, their ideology, and their policies. And the Republicans don't show up. And so I think it's time for us, and this is exactly what Jack Kemp believed his whole career. It is time for us to go into every part of America, be clear about the fact that the failures of the left, the failures of their bureaucracy, the failures of their policy, and the failures of their leadership has led to the disaster we're living in, and then offer dramatic, bold new solutions. I think it should be a very major part of any campaign this fall.
So a physical presence there, showing up. There you are in Paris, showing up for an important international conference to free Iran. Here we are now, what, about a year after the Iranian nuclear deal? Newt, have things gone from bad to worse?
Well, they've gone from bad to worse, and you can tell because today, and I've been involved all the way back to when I was in Congress because I felt strongly that the Free Iran movement was being discriminated against by the U.S. State Department to try to appease the dictatorship in Tehran. Today, for the first time, Prince Turki Al Faisal, major figure in Saudi Arabia, former head of their intelligence, came here to speak. This is like an earthquake. To have the Saudis on the side of the free Iranians is a real signal of how much the Saudis are afraid of the dictatorship and a real step towards ultimately overthrowing the dictatorship. So it's a very exciting day to be here.
Newt, Donald Trump has been quoted as saying he doesn't like the United States agreement with Iran especially, but he probably will not tear the agreement up. Should he rethink that?
Yeah, I've not seen him say that. I've seen him say on occasion that he tear it up the first day. So I don't know where he is right now, and it's not a topic that we've talked about.
Well, let me ask what you would advise whomever is the next.
I'd advise tearing it up the first day, and I'd advise establishing a policy to actively work covertly to overthrow the dictatorship. We will never be safe in the Middle East as long as the Iranian dictatorship is in power.
Let me ask about the peaceful transfer of power here again in the United States with the election coming up in November. You may not want to handicap it, but a lot of polling has been going on. A lot of Americans have offered their opinion on social media. It appears you are the favorite of the Republican base. Do you believe Mr. Trump will heed what he might be reading on the internet?
You've known me for many years. Look, I have no idea. This is his call. It's got to be based on his decision about who could be president. It's got to be based on his decision about who the chemistry is right with. If you're going to work closely with a guy for 4 years, you ought to take some time and think about it. We're old friends, but I deeply respect the fact that this is up to Donald Trump, and he's got to decide who he wants to have as his vice presidential nominee.
You joked earlier, making a cultural reference that might be a bit dated, to Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, being comfortable, being on the road together. What is it about Newt Gingrich and Donald Trump that is those things you have in common, you believe?
Well, if you watched us in Cincinnati together, we both like talking to crowds. We both like explaining the basics. We are both committed to fundamentally, profoundly changing Washington. We both have kind of a slight irreverence that doesn't fit the normal uptight political model. I think there are those patterns there. In a sense, we're the political equivalent of jazz musicians. We both love to play with the audience and get a really good rhythm going and have it be exciting and fun and memorable. And I think on all those ways. And then, frankly, we're both deeply committed to taking apart the left, and we're having fun doing it, and we're having fun driving them crazy.
All right, that was Newt from Paris on Saturday. Now your calls at 1-877-NEWSMAX, and we go to a town I used to represent in the Congress, New River, Arizona. That's where James is watching tonight. Hi, James. Hello, James. James didn't get the television turned down, so there's a disparity. We'll try to get back to James, but let's go now to Altoona, Pennsylvania, and Sandra. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, how you doing, JD?
Doing okay, thanks. Who's your pick?
My pick is Newt for a couple reasons. One, he has been in politics for a long time where Donald has not. Okay, he knows the insider. He did a contract to make our country better again, and it worked. And he just reminds me of someone who would make a great vice president. And for heaven's sakes, if anything would ever happen to the president, Donald Trump, he would also make a great president.
Well, I got to serve with him when we were voting on that contract with America, the first 100 days that Republicans were in charge of Congress in over 40 years. And Newt is a can-do guy. And Sandra, we thank you for picking up the phone tonight in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Now, stay with us. More of your calls. And when we come back, internet sensations and Trump supporters, Diamond and Silk. That and an update from John Bachman, Donald Trump on the stump, as Newsmax Prime continues.